Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to this evening's debate. I'm Helen Blue, the current Agri-Chairman for Devon Young Farmers. So first of all, a huge thank you for everyone that's tuned in this evening. This is the first of 4 debates that will be happening in the coming months. So we're very fortunate tonight. We've got 4 fantastic speakers lined up to debate the topic of, is recruiting and retaining new entrants key to driving the agricultural industry forward? A very topical question, which I'm sure will spark a very interesting debate. So I would like to introduce our chairman for this evening, who is David Fursdon, Lord Lieutenant of Devon, but also our very own President of Devon Young Farmers. So we are incredibly privileged to have David here this evening to chair this evening's debate. I know he is a man in demand with a very busy diary, so a huge thank you for giving up your time this evening to join us. So just to give everyone a little bit of context on the structure of this evening, we will be starting with each panellist giving a short opening remark on their take of the question. This will be followed by a period of debate and then a question and answer session. So we would love for this to be a really interactive debate, and questions are encouraged. So if anyone has any questions at any time throughout the debate, you should be able to see a chat button on your screen. If you click on that one, you will be able to type your question up that I will be able to pick up and then hopefully bring that forward to the panel. So without any further ado, I would like to pass over to our chairman for this evening, and enjoy the debate, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Helen, and I'm delighted to be here. I am sorry not to be able to see all of you, and that's always one of the great things about the debate that we have at the county show, and we normally get a little bit of an atmosphere going with everybody there. This is a little bit different, but I'm delighted, and all credit to the young farmers for continuing with the debating tradition even in a lockdown year. So thank you very much for the work that you and Dan have put in to setting all this up. Helen's explained how it's going to happen, and the panelists have promised me that they're going to stay within their 4 minutes for their introductory statement. I should introduce them to you, and so I'll start with Ali Kappa. And Ali Kappa comes from the Herefordshire-Worcestershire border, where she farms in a family farm, and they are one of the leading hop producers in the UK. As she was saying to me just now, not easy in a year when people aren't buying booze, really, or not to the extent that they normally do. She's a non-exec director of NFU Mutual and chairman of the NFU Horticulture and Potatoes Board since 2016. And she has masses of experience, and most conferences that one goes to, Ali is there in one format or another, talking wise words. So Ali, great to see you. Thank you for coming. Peter Reid was Devon Young Farmers County Chairman in 2008. And comes from a family dairy farm background, and now he works for Bicton and Duchy College in the apprentice department and is program manager for the Level 4 Agricultural Business Management Apprenticeship Program. So we'll know a lot about young people in the industry. Chris Cardell is a dairy farmer from near Truro, and he's chaired the NFU National Tenants Forum since 2014, and I've been lucky enough to be with Chris on several occasions over those years, and we've found that in general terms we tend to agree, although I'll have to pretend not to this evening in order to provoke him. But generally Chris has done a lot for the NFU, for the tenanted sector, and he's interested in tenancy reform. He's taken the issue of the county farms estates really seriously and the challenges that that's had, done his best to try and get some sense into that. And he and his wife run a kennels and a cattery, which of course is another diversified business. He's one of those farmers who've diversified. And of course, in a COVID-19 year, diversification hasn't always been the answer. And finally, Matt Darke, who's the current Vice Chairman of Devon YFC, in the past Agri-Chairman. And he works on a family mixed farm, dairy, beef, sheep and arable, and is the 4th generation there. He studied at Duchy College and did what for some people is a rite of passage, the 7 months in New Zealand. And I imagine that he learnt plenty out there. So that's your panel for this evening. And I'm going to go straight into asking them to give their statements. And if I take them in the order in which I introduced them and start with Ali, would you like to start, Ali?
Yes, good evening, everyone. Thanks very much, David. So firstly, I have got a black eye and a fractured thumb. In fact, I've got a fractured cheekbone as well, in case any of you are thinking she looks a bit odd. I do. So apologies. In terms of this question, is recruiting and retaining new entrants key to driving the agricultural industry forward? I'm going to sound like I'm sitting on the fence, but I think actually you need both. You need people for whom farming is in their blood, and you do need new people into the industry as well. And I would say that I am both. I am a farmer's daughter. Both my grandfathers farmed. In fact, one of them was also an auctioneer. I had no intention of getting involved in farming whatsoever. And when I left home to go to college, I went to do fashion and textiles. And I smartly then, as soon as I'd finished doing my college studies, went to London, and I had a 15-year career in advertising and marketing. And I reached quite a senior level and had amazing experience managing large teams, big budgets, and working for all sorts of weird and wonderful clients, from launching Heathrow Express, which was lots of work with BA and flying off all over the place trying to attract their customers onto Heathrow Express, right through to working with businesses like NTL, so telecoms, working with the likes of Sainsbury's, Asda, Boots the Chemist, all sorts of big blue chip companies. So amazing experience. And then I went on a blind date and I met my husband, and it's the business that I'm involved in. I'm now a partner in the business, is his family business. He's a 2nd generation hop and apple farmer, and we run that business together with, as is always the case, with his father, who is still an active farming partner at the grand old age of 82. And it works. I wasn't intending to get involved at all, but I feel like effectively a new entrant, because I am bringing a whole load of new skills and new thought to the industry, because I'm able to apply all that I learnt from all those other industries. What I would say though is that this is a hard industry, and if I hadn't grown up in it, and I hadn't grown up understanding the hours and understanding the commitment and understanding that you often don't get a weekend, I think I'd be finding it really difficult. I have to say I love it. I feel very humbled actually to represent farmers and growers all over the country. And I think sometimes farming's just another business. At the end of the day, if the numbers don't stack up, you should stop doing it. But it isn't just another business. How many hotel owners or garage forecourt owners do you hear talking about the soil and the heritage and them being the custodian of that business for just this generation? You don't hear other business owners talking in quite that language. So it is different. It isn't just another business, although I do think it's helpful to always try and apply a very business-like look, and particularly at the numbers, at all of our businesses. So I'm sounding like I'm sitting on the fence. For me, one of the most important things in this industry is collaboration and working together. We're a bunch of very diversified, very small businesses, and the more that we can work together to represent to whomever our customer is. Most of our customers are big corporate businesses, and collaboration, I think, is key. I do love representing the fruit and veg sector because they're very, very good collaborators. I think in terms of what I've brought to the industry, it's really about representation. And for me, that's education, often of officials and some of our elected officials. Engagement, it's about finding solutions, and it's about engaging the public. So that really, in summary, hopefully is a bit of an introduction.
Thank you, Ali. That was great and really interesting. Peter, if you're happy to go next, if you can carry on. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for asking me this evening to be on the panel for this debate. It's a great opportunity and very exciting to be part of the first one for Devon YFC. So congratulations to the Federation for getting this going. I think Ali's touched on a lot of things that most of us are thinking, but with regards to new entrants, they're definitely out there. So with my role with the college, I manage our level 4 agricultural business management program. So that's potential farm managers, people looking to take on family farms. The students do a full tenant application with the council. So again, it could be potential tenant farmers. They're definitely there. So my students, fantastic ideas, really keen, lots of energy, got the motivation. They're just really struggling to get into the industry to find those opportunities, whether it's a tenant farm, home farm, where they're sort of welcomed with their new ideas. So I think the collaboration that Ali touched on is really important, not just with the industries who we're trying to provide for and who our markets are, but I think family members as well. I think it's really important that as a family you have that, the new entrants and keeping them. So the retaining part of the title of the debate is really important as well. It's what can we do and what do we make sure we do to keep the new fresh blood as such into the industry. It's not about, as people know me from before, it's not about getting rid of the older generation at all. It's about that succession and giving the new entrants opportunities to keep them, allowing them to share their ideas. And they've got fantastic ones there. And I think with this whole COVID thing over the last few months, it's really showing where the consumer is beginning to think, actually, where is my food coming from? So again, great opportunities there. They just need that that support from tenants, farmers, and family to make sure that they can show their abilities and keep the industry going.
Thank you, Peter, very much. And a new set of questions that you've introduced from the ones that Ali did. So that was really good to hear that. Chris, if I could come to you now and ask you to do your introductory piece, please.
Evening, everybody. Thank you for inviting me. As the chairman says, it's probably a risky thing inviting a Cornishman onto a Devon YFC first debate, but really pleased to be here. And YFC is something that I know many of you know us, and we've been involved in for all of our lives, really. Just a little bit of background about us, how we ended up here and how I ended up doing what I do. Our family of the Cardells go back in farming to sort of 1500s in Cornwall. But unfortunately, my dad died when I was only 8 months old. So there was a break there. So that was there when, you know, we became new entrants to all intents and purposes, although we had the background similar to what Ali described it in her own situation. So how do we end up here? YFC farm tendering competition, basically. We did the farm tendering competition. Not long after that, a holding came up, not too far from where we were living at the time, and we were lucky enough to get it. Times were slightly different in those days. We were only courting at the time. We went for the interview, the two of us. We got the farm, and at the end of the interview, the chairman said, "Well, I suppose you'll be getting engaged now." So those were the slightly different times. So we did. We got engaged, and in fact, Dawn's parents were away that year, so we then went on. We got the farm, we organised the wedding, and everything was sorted by the time the mother-in-law got back. So that made life a little bit easier. But anyway, we started on a small part-time unit, 50 acres. We both worked off the farm. We then moved on to progressional dairy holding, and then 15 years ago, we moved here to Probus. It was a diversification that had just been started when we got here in a small way. and at that time it was actually very difficult to raise the finance to do the diversification. Now all the banks want to look at things like diversifications. That ticks a big box, but at that time diversification was new, and actually we had to change banks to even find one that would take us on to actually move to fund the diversification side of it, which we had to buy into to start with. But so, you know, we've got a dairy farm similar to most council holdings, pedigree jerseys, but also too we've got about, well, up until COVID, we had about 3,500 customers on the books for the diversification. So that's a little bit about us. The work I do within the NFU, chairing the tenant forum, is closely linked to a lot of work that we do with TRIG. I know the chairman has been involved in that sort of stuff as well. But what we're looking at there in relation to tonight's sort of title is not really making it easy for young entrants to get in, but to create those opportunities that might be in council farms, but also too in every other form as well. Probably going to be a bit controversial now as a Cornishman on a Devon debate, but I think what something, if you take away from tonight, is the lowly Cornishman said to you was that the cream will rise to the top. And I think that's the thing that we need to create, is opportunities to allow the best to rise to the top, because they inevitably, in most businesses, they will. So it's not about making it as easy, it's about making those opportunities. And within Devon, you're very lucky. You've still got a county farms estate. I think you've got about 74 holdings on the last count. So that there are the opportunities there, but also to what we push for, and I think most of the organisations, and luckily we've got a minister who's keen on young entrants as well. So actually in the Ag Bill, there is a mention for young entrants, new entrants, and it's looking at possibly putting some funding towards county farms, but also for any estate to create opportunities for youngsters to get into the industry. So, you know, how far can we take that, I think is the big thing that the, you know, youth have got to look at going forward. You know, can we prize the likes of the David, who sits on different organisations with, you know, different varying estates? Can we encourage those sort of people to look at that haven't let land in the past, but possibly, you know, may look, the criteria may fit them to allow young entrant in. But also too, I think that the thing that any of you that are looking at this, if you want to get into the industry, you've got to take every chance that comes along. And, you know, that might be very small to build things up, but you've got to take those chances when they come along. So I think that's probably enough for me, David, to start things off, but hopefully it get some debate going. And you're still muted, David.
Yep, I saw that. Just saw it in time. Thanks, Chris. So a useful perspective. What I'll do in the interim is, if I can just come back to those of you that have spoken and just ask you some questions. And so, Ali, if I could start with you. You sat on the fence a bit, and I think you showed that you were partly a new entrant and partly not. However, I suppose it's fair to say that if you hadn't been on that blind date, you wouldn't have had that step into the farming industry that you had, and what for some new entrants don't have that opportunity. So if you'd just been working in marketing in London, and sounds like it was a successful marketing career, and you decided for some reason that you would quite like to use your skills in agriculture, how would you have gone about trying to do that?
Actually, that's quite straightforward. I had made the decision to come back to Herefordshire, and I actually was working part-time in London and going down 2 days a week and then working a day or two from home. But actually, I think if I'd made that decision with that old hat on, I would have continued to work on the agency side, but switched into an agency, of which there are a few, looking after the sector, looking after food and farming. That would have been the obvious route into the industry. But in terms of becoming a farmer, I don't think I would have done. I'm being, you know, brutally honest. I don't think I would have done.
And and the debate title says, is recruiting and retaining new entrants key to driving the agricultural industry forward? Now, you are in a representative role in what you do for the NFU and for the Agri-Debate and others. So how would you answer that question? Are new entrants the key to driving the agricultural industry forward? I mean, it's a fairly interesting time for the agricultural industry right now. Could you just answer that question?
So if I look at it through the lens of our own business first, we only farm 200 acres, but we farm 200 acres of hops and apples, which is every part of the farm is covered in either hops or apples. It's very high labour requirement and lots of attention to detail required. And I guess one of the first things I did as a partner here in the business was when our old farm manager retired and left the business, my father-in-law was minded to recruit somebody who is in his late 40s, early 50s with plenty of experience. And I took a very different view. I said, no, I'd really rather that we had somebody who's much younger, in their 20s, somebody who's got loads of energy, loads of dynamism, somebody who's probably going to struggle with some of the man management bit, but that can bring a whole host of other skills and characteristics to our business and basically keep us on our toes. And that's what we've done. And we have an excellent young farm manager here. In terms of retaining him, which is for me is the key part of this question, what have we done? Well, we involve him in our partnership discussions. We involve him in the planning. We involve him in making sure that he is feeling like he's getting the training that he needs. And we encourage, and where we can, we fund his involvement and participation in industry groups. So for example, in fruit, we have something called the Next Generation Fruit Growers Group. And we encourage his participation in that, because then he's surrounded by lots of young peers, but he's bringing forward lots of new, really good ideas into our business. So whether you come in through, whether you grow up in a business like my husband did, and I did, but I didn't have any intention of being involved in it, or whether you are recruited into it, the industry does need to work hard to retain people, because we're competing with other industries.
I'm going to see, Ali, if you'll bear with me, I'm going to see whether Matt has now got, Matt, can you give me a thumbs up if you think you've now got the volume bit sorted out?
Possibly. Does that?
Yeah, let's give it a go, Matt. Let's give it a go.
So what you didn't hear was, thank you, David. So fellow young farmers, ladies and gentlemen, yeah, thank you for inviting me onto the Agri-Debate this evening. So basically, I think it is vital that we recruit and try to maintain new entrants into the industry, but I don't think it's the key thing the only thing that's going to help the industry go forward. I think there's a lot of education also into people that have got holdings and farms, how they can keep their business going if they haven't got necessarily any children or younger generations to take over their business. And I think it's like maybe for the older generation, it might not be common knowledge of how they can hand a business on without selling it, or necessarily, or just helping even people that have got more than one son and the family business isn't big enough to keep them in the industry without losing them. So yeah, I know it's a bit on the fence, but that's where, yeah, that's my thoughts on it really.
Lovely. Thank you very much. That's great. So, and I'm glad you're with us. We would have been the poorer without you, so thank you for that. I'm going to just go back to Ali for one.
David, you've gone on to mute. I can't hear you.
Sorry. Ali, you went off down a marketing direction. and use your marketing skills in the business. What, in your experience, having come across a lot of farmers around the country, what one other skill other than marketing do you think that farmers need to show more of in order to drive the agricultural industry forward?
A bit of vision, actually. I've got a list here of what I think makes a good farmer. I think you need skills, you need passion, resilience, fortitude, and patience. Oh my God, we need patience. Particularly when the weather throws stuff at us like it has been in the last 12 months. But you need entrepreneurship, determination, self-belief, attention to detail. You have to be able to take whatever problem is thrown at you, and there are numerous, and find solutions. But all the way through that, you've got to have a thread, a direction of travel. And that's why I say, I think you need vision. And if I was asked for just one thing, it is having that vision.
Thank you very much. Do you think you need optimism as well?
Bags of it.
Right now, you need a fair bit of optimism. But yeah, vision, absolutely, that's great. Okay. Peter, if I could come on to you, if you were to be asked the same question, working with, and you mentioned young people having great ideas that you work with, they may be working as apprentices in the industry, that sort of thing. Could you say something about those, the skill and how those ideas have got a chance of being picked up and taken forward for the sake of the agricultural industry?
Yeah, thank you, David. I think what Ali touched on in one of her comments with regards to making sure your staff is skilled and keeping them involved in the business is the key thing for keeping new entrants actually retained within the business and within the industry, because a lot of my apprentices, you can imagine to start with, we have to be very careful they're not just there doing the mundane jobs and given no opportunities. So when they move up through the levels, especially to level 4 business management, they are actually having to make business decisions. So they have to work with the farmer, and majority of my students are working for other people. They're not on their home farms. So having that collaboration there between the farmer and him actually, or her, giving the apprentice that opportunity, I actually do see quite a few of my students stay on that farm and become really a main part of the business. So that development there. So I think what Ali said, that's really vital, is actually looking after your staff and actually keeping them within the business and within the ideas, and letting them make ideas or making decisions. And obviously, inevitably, some of those are going to be wrong, but isn't that what makes a good business? Something potentially going wrong, and you can learn lessons from it and then build on it. So unless they're given those opportunities. But I also think with regards to keeping them in, it's like, how do you make space for them? So Matt talked about it as well, but how do you make space for them to take on the family farm? Because potentially there's nowhere for the farmer, the parents or the retirees to go. So actually that could be one of the main sticking points, is them holding on to their farms, because actually they haven't necessarily planned of where they're going to go, and they have nowhere to go to retire to let the next generation in. So I think that's an area that we would need to look at. But the students have a lot of marketing, they have fresh ideas, they're looking very much towards the focus of the consumer, what the consumer's wanting with regards to environmental as well as the consumer trends, and they have ideas of how to meet those requirements. But again, like what we've all said, they need those opportunities. So I think my biggest thing would be to the current farmers out there, as well as, you know, you can get into the new entrants through the farms, like Chris said, but I think the farmers that are out there at the moment, they need to give these people the opportunities, because I'm afraid that's the way, in my view, that's the way that the business is going to be surviving moving forward. So they need to welcome it, otherwise it's going to look quite dire.
What would happen, Peter, if there was a rule in this country that said that you weren't allowed to farm over the age of 60? What would happen to British agriculture? What would happen to British agriculture? Well,
there would be quite a change in the landscape, I would have thought. I think actually it would definitely survive. It would go through a bit of a revolution, but as I say, it's all about passing on the knowledge. And if the farmers are there at the moment are potentially not necessarily passing that knowledge on and bringing the next generation on, then it's going to look a very sad place, to be fair. If all the over 60s went, it would certainly open up a lot of opportunities. And quite a few of my students, I'm going to be blunt, a lot of my students do blame that generation for holding them back and not giving them the opportunities, because they're sat on their farms. They don't necessarily want to farm it. They might potentially haven't got the health to do it, but they don't want to leave it. So they're just sort of sitting on this farm when they've got my students who would really give their arm to have that opportunity, and it's not there. So, you know, we need to do something about bridging that gap there. So, you know, if you potentially got rid of the over 60s, I think that would upset a lot, but it could give a lot of opportunities and certainly refresh the industry, I would have thought.
Thank you. I well remember talking to a farmer I knew who had told me, he rang me up actually, and he said, "You won't believe it, but Dad's handed over the checkbook to me, and I'm really excited." And that was quite exciting, except the fact that he was 73. And his father had only just handed over the checkbook. So, you know, he had lived with the frustration of a farmer over 100 keeping the checkbook to himself. So, you know, it's balance, isn't it? It's balance. Okay, Chris, just looking at your career and how it's gone, really interesting. The business about diversification is an interesting one, isn't it? Because actually you were in the forefront of diversification, probably to some extent, when you started off, and here we are in a year like this, and I suppose it's the first year when one has something so completely unexpected that it puts a spoke in the wheel. But in terms of diversification, do you think that the future of the agricultural industry involves diversification? Is that a key plank of the future of agriculture?
I think with any business, it's about keeping a balance, isn't it? So, you know, it's not too long that we have to look back, and many farms were mixed farms and had a little bit of everything. We become quite specialised now, and that's been driven by lower production costs, but in lots of cases. But I think it's about keeping a balance. The issue around this sort of diversifications is really, how does that fit in with the other business? Because a lot of people, a lot of diversifications involve dealing with people. Not a lot of farmers are used to dealing with people. So that becomes a bit of a struggle for some. So I think if you're looking at diversification, you've got to make sure that it fits with your skill set, just the same as it does whether you're looking at taking on a dairy farm or a beef farm or a sheep farm. You've got to make sure that your skill set, and if necessary, get the training to fit that. But the diversifications are a little bit different. You really have to want to be able to do whichever form you sort of choose.
Okay, interesting your comment that the cream will rise to the top. You left out the fact that you then put the jam on, but there is a sort of recognition that it isn't just a question of succeeding to a tenancy, just because actually I've come across people who have succeeded to a tenancy that never really wanted it in the first place, and the father was so keen to preserve a succession of tenants on a farm that they sort of almost pushed a slightly reluctant member of the family to go forward. I wondered whether you would have any comments about the point that has been made a bit by Peter and again by Matt about ways of bringing young people into farming that doesn't necessarily mean getting a tenancy. Do you think that the older generation who don't have their own family successors are willing to bring people in? and to to get them involved in the way that Ali was talking about with the farm manager that she has?
Yeah, and I think it goes back a little bit to, you were asking Peter there just now about the sort of the age spectrum, and I noticed there was a question on the chat line there just now about it as well. And I think the work that we did together, quite recently with the Prince, trying to get together some housing, and how do we get the older people out? I think the common one that most of us use is how do we get the old farts out to allow the youngsters in, and that's always been a challenge. But I think also too, you sort of said about the age spectrum within the industry, but actually, I think you asked, should we get rid of the over 60s? But actually, it's most of the youngsters are actually doing the work at the moment and driving most of the businesses. Actually, the over 60 sort of figure is sort of held there because you've got generations on the same farm. It's like Ali said, she's got one of her parents still there at 80, so and many businesses will have that, and quite often that older generation person is the one that's registered as the business, but actually it's the younger element of the family that are driving it. So I think we have to take that into consideration, but I think also too it's looking at all the options that are available. I think is sort of where your question was sort of leading. You don't necessarily have to have a farm, but I think we're hopefully what's in the agricultural bill that the minister talks about trying to provide funding to do some sort of forward planning with the councils, but also to trying to encourage other people to start letting. I think that's a good one. We've looked at from the NFU point of view as well, looking at sort of creating a bit of a database as well, trying to match different sort of people that have the land and those that want to get into the industry. I know the minister put up some pilot money to trial it in this side, in the UK as well, or sort of England, but in Wales they have more funding, and that's actually gone quite well. So it's really priming that side of it. I think the people are, not everybody's driven by money, and there are quite a few people that sit on land and they have nobody take it on, but actually they don't want to leave the farm, but they would provide a start for a young person. So I think if we can encourage the minister to develop that a bit more, I think it needs priming a bit more. But I think there are people out there. Not everybody's driven by letting the land for the highest figure.
Thank you very much. As I think we did a little letting exercise at home for some young farmers, and what was interesting to me about that was that we said initially when we advertised it, we did a thing with Farmers Weekly. It was only a small farm, very small, but we said we're not setting down any stipulations about on the basis on which you can do this. So you can bid either to be a tenant, or you can actually bid on another basis. You can work with us. We can come up with some different structure. We offered to do some of the marketing through our own website with them for their produce and so on. And of the bids we had, and we had something like 25 bids, I suppose, every single one of them was a bid for a tenancy. And I think it was perhaps because the professionals who they went to advise them were only happy talking about comparative rents and tenancies, and hadn't really got the confidence to look at any innovative ways of working with them. I mean, we've got a great couple that, and you'll be pleased to know, we didn't say anything, but they are getting married. But they are, they're farming it, and they are, I think, they've made a big step forward. So
I think that's linked as well with what you just said, David, into sort of the FBTs. Everybody knocks the FBTs, but I think as an industry, we're all guilty, and that's on the farming side and on the sort of intellectual side, of taking those documents off the top shelf. And actually, the FBT was drafted to fit the farm and what the landlord and the tenant wanted to do and to get out of that farm. And we haven't really got the best out of it. Everybody keeps it, but actually we haven't made the best out of the original legislation.
I completely agree with you. And finally, Chris, for you, the county farms, and I've been a real supporter of the county farms, but they've become a block. there doesn't seem to be an easy route out of a county farm onto a bigger tenancy if the private estates and the big corporations and the National Trust and others don't provide those opportunities. Then you get stuck on the county farms ladder and you can't move on. And I think that is why one or two of the counties have said, well, look, it's not providing the ladder into agriculture that we thought, and because we're short of money, we'll flog some of it off. How does one deal with that blockage? I know, they try now and time limit it and don't have succession rights and so on in some counties, but it doesn't seem very easy if other people aren't going to row in and give opportunities. You found opportunities, but are they not there now?
Yeah, and I think what we've tried to do, possibly you're looking at measuring the county farms as we did in the old way, and if you didn't move off that farm, then the farm wasn't delivering. And part of what we tried to do within Trig was to explain, well, actually, there's more value to the county farm system. And I'll use our own holding here as a slight example, just to explain a little bit what I mean on that. In that, yes, we are of the older generation, but we've done three holdings. We're here now. We tried to move. We like you've just explained, we just didn't manage to find the holding to move to when the daughter and the son-in-law were here. So actually what we did, we developed their business from this farm. So they've now moved off this farm. They now run a contract business on nearly 300 acres of their own. So although we personally not move, part of the holding has delivered in that somebody else has moved off. And also too, within the diversification side, it's linked up a little bit with what Ali was saying. We've always tried to take on students within that system and train them up. And a number of those have gone off this holding to actually do their own businesses away from this as well. And also too, because of the diversification, we've got, like I said before COVID, 3,500 on the books of people within probably predominantly within a 20-mile radius that use the facilities of this holding. So it's delivering in more than just moving on. So that's sort of one example. But hopefully, going forward, will the new world of no BPS, will that trigger change? I think, the minister talks, well, without BPS, rents will come down, so that will allow young entrants in. I don't completely buy into that. I think there will be change within the rental figures, but opportunities will come because of it. I think more than cheap rents, I think the opportunities will come, because a lot, as Pete sort of said just now, there's a lot of older people sitting on holdings just because they want to stay there, and actually in some instances they've lived off the BPS payment, but that's not going to be there, in the shape going forward. So I think it will bring forward opportunities, not necessarily a great deal of cheaper rents. I think we'll see some movement in the rental value, but not possibly, the cheap rents that everybody would like to see.
Sure, thank you. I think they've lived on the BPS and maybe the environmental stewardship payments that weren't particularly taxing as well. Yeah. Thank you, Chris. And Matt, when you went to New Zealand, did you come across share farming, and was that what you had in mind when you talked about there were other ways of getting young people involved in farming?
Yeah, definitely. That's one thing or one real big difference that I would see between agriculture over there and the agriculture industry over here, in the fact of we've got farms over here that are like for us, for example, I'm the 4th generation on this farm, and all depending on what my 2 children's minds are, hopefully bred the 5th generation. So you wouldn't see that in New Zealand, and a lot of that is because there's just a lot more of an openness to this. So the shared farming agreement, where someone who's got a bit older and doesn't want, unable to farm the land as they used to or should be. So a young person comes in with, so some of the agreements would be they provide the animals for the farm, and then obviously the landowner provides the land, and the profit is split between the two. So that is a great way to see someone come into a farm that wouldn't necessarily progressed into it through the family tree then. So it was an eye-opener to see so many new people onto a farm, and moving from farm to farm over there is like moving house over here. It was, oh well, that farm's got, I don't know, another 50 acres or something to this one, so we're seriously looking at moving, whereas that would be a huge change for a farmer to do that over here. And farmers would, like landowners would, do that to try and help. So if they've got a shared farmer in with them, they would potentially move on to a farm that's got more land for their shared farmer younger person to be able to expand their cows, but then they're both benefiting because they're able to, is more profit to share between them. So that's one way that I've seen is something that really it'd be good to try and open a lot of the older generation's eyes to over here in a way, I think.
Thank you. I think a lot of it is about valuations, actually, in truth, and people are reluctant to let people in on the values of farms, which is just a different way of doing it. And I think farms are seen in a slightly different way, but really interesting point. Thank you, Matt. And I think you also said, I think wisely, that new entrants is only part of what's going to take agriculture forward. And can you just say something about what else will take agriculture forward from your mind?
Yeah, that's one thing that I think there's a lot of education, a lot of learning to be done in our industry. Like it was mentioned there between you and Chris there a minute ago about the BPS leaving, and how our farm's going to be able to survive like that. And like it's already been said in the debate, farming is a business at the end of it. And how many other businesses are there get handouts to keep them afloat? So whether the education needs to be done to farmers, like to all different generations of the farming, or whether it needs to be done to consumers and suppliers as well, because at the end of the day, there's two things that people need to survive on the land, and that's food and water. So why is it that the one thing that we produce is food, and that needs to be subsidised, or at the moment it's being subsidised to keep those businesses afloat? So I think somehow we've got to try and figure a way of like making the public aware of is food more important than the TV and the telephone? That like going around on flash telephones and making sure you've got the biggest TV you can get in your room and all those sort of gadgets, instead of like in a way prioritizing their money to the things that are actually going to help them survive in a way.
It's a great point, but it's a really tricky one. And if you're a politician, you steer clear of that, fearing for your life, don't you, a little bit? But thank you all, panelists, very much. A really helpful comments. I'm going to look to Helen now to see if she can feed in some of the questions. Helen?
Hello. Yes, we've had a number of questions come through. One of the ones that I would like to start with is, how can new entrants and young people accumulate the capital they need to get into the agricultural industry if they are at present working in quite a low paid job?
Right. Someone like to put a hand up in the air so I can see you on the screen that would like to answer? Ali, let's have you, please.
I think there's always an assumption to be a farmer you have to own land. And I know I sit here as somebody that's married into a business, so there'll probably be some people listening that'll go, well, you would say that. But I don't think to be a farmer that you need to own land. So that capital piece, I think what is really important is that if you've got new entrants who are looking for routes in, that they look at all the routes in, and there aren't many. There's the apprenticeship level, but there's also actually quite a lot of really good management schemes in the industry. Some of them are supply chain oriented. In fresh produce, we've got something called MDS, which is Management Development Services. That's what it stands for. That's a brilliant scheme. That gives you 6 months in a range of different businesses, big fresh produce businesses, and you will definitely end up with a job in a big business, farming, growing, maybe marketing, maybe selling, but involved in food, if you take one of those roles. Now, they're not for everybody, but I do sometimes scratch my head about why there's always this correlation between I have to own land to be a farmer. And if you overcome that, then you overcome the capital issue.
Thank you, Ali. And I would echo that with Beeswax Dyson Farming, which I chair, and we have got some farm managers, and they are having the opportunities to farm in a way that you just wouldn't have the chance to do in many places, driving high-tech machinery and actually, you know, at the cutting edge of some of what's going on. Now, if it's farming you want, then you can get that and be paid a salary, and a reasonable good salary, and you can have some fun on the way. So I'll just echo that. I don't think it has to be, you don't, if you're going to go into I don't know, marketing or something, you don't get asked to be given a supermarket on day one of your own. You work in somebody else's business and learn it, don't you? So anybody else want to comment on that about capital? Chris? Chris first, and then Peter.
I was just going to say, you know, I think, David, you've attended some of our tenant forum conferences that we have every other year within the NFU. And in the afternoon, we always have the sort of farmer panel, and we try and get as many of those to be youngsters as possible. And it's quite interesting, the different ways that people get into the industry. And actually, some of the more sort of out there are the more exciting ones, and they've really grasped the opportunities that are there, and they've just gone with the opportunities rather than look at the old framework. So yeah, sort of agree with what you're saying, really.
Okay, Peter.
Yeah, thank you, David. I think also it's a good old thing with the Brits, isn't it? We all like to make sure we own something. It's about owning our castle or our house or our land or whatever it might be. And I think going back to what Matt said, I also worked in New Zealand for a while when I was younger, and that assumption of actually owning something, it wasn't really too bothered about it. It was looking at the opportunities and moving where that opportunity was to. And I think also in Devon and Cornwall, but you know, we're very traditional. We like to stay where we were born and bred. But with my students, I take them all over the country looking at different farms. And some of the farms that we've gone to, talking to the farm managers, exactly what you were saying, David, managing 3,000-4,000 acre, like for James Dyson, some of his farms I've taken students to. It's a farm manager. And when the students ask, how did you get to this position? Nothing to do with a farming background. It was something they happened to do a season. They wanted a bit of extra cash in the summer. They drove a tractor. They worked hard. The farm manager at the time thought, that's a good person. We'll look after him. Going back to what Ali was said, they developed that person, and now they're managing a farm. And he said, I had no plans to do anything like that. And just going back to some of my students, a lot of them aren't really from a farming background at all. They're coming into it and they're really keen to develop onto that. And they aren't necessarily looking to own anything. They just want that opportunity to use their skills to enhance somebody's business. So they're looking for those opportunities.
Thank you, Peter. Helen, let's go back to another question.
Another question that's actually already been answered by Ali and Chris through the chat, but I don't think that was available to see by all of the attendees, so it's one worth mentioning, was do you think that there is a stigma in the industry about employing entrants who aren't from a farming background versus those who have a farming background? And how do we overcome this potential stigma?
Okay, so Matt, do you think there's a stigma?
I think there is a little bit, in the way that you can't, when you when you're looking at a CV or anything like that, nothing beats experience. Like when you're looking at like maybe a group of CVs, or looking at a group of people, if there's someone with experience, then I suppose people are always going to try and find that experience, but or that experienced person. But I think it doesn't need to be that the most experienced person is the best person for the job, just because like there might be someone who's as willing to learn something and can pick things up quicker than somebody who already lives on a farm. Then I think there shouldn't be a stigma, but there is. I think that's the long and short, the answer of that one, really.
Okay. Because of time, I'm just going to tell you what Chris said in answer to Rosie. Hopefully the day of the stigma is changing, and I think that the great opportunities our agricultural colleges have provided has helped in that area. So as an industry, we need to fight to keep those colleges, and many of them are struggling at the moment in the middle of the COVID outbreak. And Ali's answer was, sometimes, yes, there is a stigma. However, as a new entrant, if you're passionate about what you do, that should shine through an application and interview. And Peter, is there a stigma?
Good question. Yes, I think there is, but it's like what people have been saying on the stand. We are improving. The industry is improving on that side of it, and I think the more that we encourage the next generation into, whether they're from a farming background or not, the better. And I think I just wanted to pick up on one thing with Matt. Seeing as it's a debate, I'm going to go for it. So I do apologise. But you just mentioned about the TVs and people wanting their phones and televisions and flash cars. In my view, that's never going to change. We're never going to change people from wanting that. So it was what I try to tell my students, and how I see it, right or wrong, is that we need to work with people like that. We need to look at marketing, look at how they make their decisions. We're never going to change, I personally don't think, people's views on that. So it's looking at that consumer, and how can we, as the next generation of the farmers, provide for that consumer, whether it's, I don't know, people at more open farms, whether it's more niche markets, looking at where people do their shopping. You go in, everybody does it. You go in and stand and watch somebody shopping and see their actual habits. You can learn a lot in 5 minutes by just watching people pick milk up or meat at a shop. So from there, we need to start working with those people, not necessarily arguing about necessarily what they spend their money on. We need to work with them.
Thank you, Peter. And very wise. I'm going to, because it's just about time up, I'm going to give Ali a quick opportunity, because she wanted to quickly make a point there. And that may be the end of the questions, Helen, just in terms of the time. But Ali, over to you.
I agree with Peter. I think the market will choose what it wants. However, I do think everybody in our industry has a responsibility, a personal responsibility. It's not anybody else's job to do whatever you can to educate the consumer, and that might be by, when you're selling at a farmer's market, to engage in conversation, or it might be taking the opportunity to go to a local primary school. Take yourself out of your comfort zone and do a lesson on food standards. I did 2 Year 8 lessons last week on food standards, and I put up some photos about what chlorinated chicken means, and I can pretty much guarantee those kids will be very clear when they're going into the supermarket. They'll be looking for American chicken, and they won't be buying it after the lesson that they had about what chlorinated chicken actually means. So I do think we have a job to educate, and we all have to take responsibility for that. We can't just leave it to good people like Peter, and we can't just leave it to our representative bodies like the NFU and the AHDB and on. And the only final thing I'd say is, in this scenario, I think it's really, really important that whether you're a new entrant or whether you're a next generation farmer, the most important thing is to treat your farming career as a career where you have a lifetime of learning, because every day I learn something new. And I'm just going to give a quick plug for Nuffield, because I think Nuffield is a fantastic organisation, and it doesn't matter what your educational background is, there is a Nuffield for everyone. And that's all about taking farmers, putting them out of their comfort zone, and actually giving them an opportunity to probably completely reshape their business. So lifetime learning is something I'd like to leave everybody with. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Ali. And I was interviewing all day yesterday for a job, and there were 2 Nuffield scholars amongst the interviewees, and my goodness me, they were impressive. And so I would completely back that up. The only other thing I would say is, in doing that educational business and engaging the public, do it sensitively. And if you come across people with different views from you, be sensitive about the way you persuade them. Don't go in like a bull in a china shop, because that's going to have the opposite effect. Listen, you've been great. Thank you for the questions that have come through from the audience. I'm sorry we haven't had a chance for more. And I'm sorry I haven't had the chance of the backwards and forwards that we do in a live debate. But I'd really like to thank the panelists for a range of opinions, different views from all of you, using your experience in particular, which is really effective on a panel like this, where you can point to practical examples in your lives that have taught you what you know and have explained why you think the way you do. So that was fantastic. Thank you to the YFC for putting this on. And in this rather unfortunate way where we all say goodbye virtually rather than saying a proper goodbye, I wish you all the best, and hopefully you'll join us for one of our other debates in the future. So thank you all very much. Thank you.